For now, let's take a look at Pimsleur. So Pimsleur is one that you may or may not have heard of them. They're very popular right now actually in one of their up-and-coming language courses that's offered for adults. And they're actually a very, very fantastic example of what we probably want to be doing in our VIPX classes, because they also focus on spoken and listening to a new language. So in a nutshell, a little bit longer of a nutshell than the Bloom's taxonomy, Pimsleur focuses on the development of long-term memory building through focus on spoken language practice and associative recall. So again, that's pretty abstract, and let's take a look at what that means and how they break down their language study and education. First up, it starts with modeling. What that means essentially is clear examples of language models, showing the student how it's done and allowing them time to process and listen to that before you expect them to be doing it themselves. After that comes bridging. So building on the previous knowledge the student has. How are they able to understand this new information in context to the old information that they have? And building those bridges makes that information stronger. It's all about those neurological connections. After that, contextualization. So using metaphors and video/audio clips to put that information into a context that makes sense. And from there, you're able to develop metacognition. So that's a very pretentious way of saying that the student is learning how to consciously utilize these strategies to the best of their ability to self-monitor and adjust activities for themselves. Quite a mouthful, but essentially it's teaching that independent learning, that fostering of the independence that we were talking about at the beginning of this scaffolding section. So it's very important for students not only to be able to use the information, but be able to become an independent learner and foster those habits that are very important and are going to benefit them not just in language learning, but in all areas of life afterward. So let's take a look at some examples of Pimsleur in action. For modeling, how to use it well? In the classroom, you can use rubrics and or model language yourself first. For us at VIPX, it makes a lot of sense to use the modeling of language first rather than a rubric, because we don't have as much time as in a brick and mortar school to be giving extra materials to the students. Make sure that you're speaking slowly and clearly. This is something that we can regulate often, and all it takes is a little bit of practice and a little bit of self-awareness when you're in the classroom. Watching playbacks of your recorded classes is a very useful tool for assessing the speed and clarity of your speech. And also a very important one is thinking aloud. So when you're reading aloud to the student, show them how your brain is working. Show them how to use the contextual clues that are going on. Build it piece by piece to show the student. And I had this recently in one of my classes where the title of the film was, I Should Have Got Her Number. A little bit of a cheesy rom-com movie that you're thinking about right now. And the student wasn't necessarily able to understand what happened in the context of the film and the plot based on that title. So I had them reread the title, then I had them reread lines of the plot, which was the man is driving in a taxi to the airport. They are stuck in traffic, there's a long wait time for them, and they start to share stories of their life. And from that, he then drops her off. And you're supposed to assess, why is this movie a romantic comedy? And by inferring from these plot points in the movie, I can lead the student through being like, all right, well, what happens when you're stuck in traffic and you're talking to somebody and you're learning about their life? How do you think he feels about her? And then they'd be like, well, I guess maybe he thinks that she's interesting. And then I'd be like, okay, great. So what about the title of that movie? I Should Have Got Her Number. Do you think that he got her number in the end, or do you think he didn't get her number? And then most of the time they'll answer, oh, he didn't get her number. All right, so great. From there, do you think that it's a happy ending or a sad ending? And they would have to tell me what they thought and why. And for me, the correct answer would be it's a sad ending because 1, he should have got her number, and 2, she's going to the airport, which means she's leaving the city, which save from maybe going on a vacation, maybe she's moving or leaving, or she didn't live here at all and it is just a vacation and she's going back home now. So there's really no hope for the romance, which is a little bit of a sad and crushing reality when you're teaching a 9-year-old child. But at the same time, that's an example of thinking aloud and helping the student see what clues to get where by modeling your thinking process and your critical thinking skills. After that, we get to bridging. So how to use this in your classroom correctly. First up, get your students thinking about all their previous knowledge on a topic. That it can be as simple as, what do you know about this? That is a nice open question where you can get the students and their gears really thinking about what frame of reference they have for this information. And then when a student doesn't understand a word, this is a really good opportunity to break it down and define it using words that they already know. So that is also a good example of bridging because it's bringing that past knowledge into context in the classroom, and they're able not only to understand what you're trying to say, but to build those connections and understand how to better utilize the language to express themselves and to find meaning in the future language that they're encountering. Moving on to contextualization. Using it in the classroom is very effective if you are applying metaphors to subjects and encouraging the student to do the same. So what this could be an example of is you are talking about a man who is sad in the class in the materials, and the sky is also raining and it's cloudy and there are thunderstorms. And you can ask the student, or rather model it for them first and tell him or her that, oh, well, I think maybe this man might be sad, and look at the weather. Don't you think that's kind of the same? Can you think of another time or situation where the man might also be sad, or where maybe you felt sad and the weather sort of made you feel the same? And maybe they could talk about fog and they felt all fuzzy in their head, or maybe they could talk about a series of bad events that happened in their life that sort of felt like a metaphor for how they felt inside. So this is an example of how you could maybe use that and explore metaphor with the student through very simple comparisons in their life to contextualize what the subject is and what the topic might be. Also, using supporting videos and or audio clips is a really great way to start developing cognitive links to things. So it can be a little bit tricky sometimes with time management to add extra videos, but sometimes, depending on the program or the level that you're teaching, there are additional videos or audio clips that are added into your classroom materials for you. So how you can use those, or why they're really good in the first place, is because it's showing something broader outside of the materials to bring it into the classroom and to show how these things fit together. You're giving another context to pad out the information that you're giving to these students. So very useful to use those in the class. And finally, when we're developing metacognition with our students, using it, remind students of strategies that you've used in the past with them. So make sure that they're remembering that maybe they've encountered this situation before, and try to keep in mind, as teacher, keep in your logbook what strategies worked best with them, so that when they're coming up to this, you can suggest something to them and you know what already works, maybe a little bit better than they do necessarily at this moment. And finally, also a really good strategy and approach is to have students rate the difficulty of questions. This could be on a simple 5-point scale where you are asking the student, oh, like, was this really easy, like a number 1, or really hard, number 5? And that way it gives them a sort of frame of reference that they build themselves in the classroom. So they know when they need to pull out the big guns of the strategies that need to help them out and support them, as well as reinforcing this idea that it's okay for there to be challenging questions. And just because you are coming up against something that you don't know the answer to, it sort of gives a sense of comfort, like, okay, well, this is a hard question and I don't have to feel so bad because I just did 3 2-point questions that were really easy and I knocked off really quickly, and this 5-pointer might be making me feel a little bit stressed out, but that's okay. And as a teacher, it's also a really good way for them to assess the learning from an external point of view, so that you get better insight into how they're doing with the materials and you can better adjust your approaches and your strategies.